saying that you are the science shows me that you are not a scientist. That is more scientism than science, as far as I'm concerned. Well, now I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday here. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. It's good to see you all again. A lot of things happened while I was away, and I'm going to try and catch up on a bunch of them here soon. But I did recall hearing about Dr. Anthony Fauci running his mouth again, and I thought this would be a good time to talk about a topic that's been on my mind, and I also want to respond to more of, well, not respond, but quasi-react, because I haven't seen the whole interview, but also probably respond to some of the things Dr. Fauci said in his interview with Face the Nation. And that was Sunday, November 28th, 2021, when that interview was. So I've got that pulled up in another tab, but for now, what I want to respond to is the, I talk about first is a concept called Scientism, which is what I have here. Scientism is very, very different from science, and it is very, very troubling. Let's put it that way. And I want to bring it up because I think of Scientism a lot, though what's going on today isn't quite the same thing. Because of the comments of Dr. Fauci and of others who say, believe the science. I follow the science. Hail science. No, science is not a belief system. We remember, science does not give you a moral compass. Science does not give you a belief system to work with. Science doesn't even give you necessarily a worldview. It is a process by which we adjudicate claims of the truth, figure out what is true, what is false in these different things that go on in the world around us with evidence and data and the like. It is not a religious fascination, and yet that is one of the things that happens, and this comes from Psychology Today, and I thought it was an interesting way of looking at scientism and what it is in here. And so I want to read through this real quick. I don't think it's too long. There's a couple of key sections here. And I think the first couple of sections are probably relevant here. Last year, I was invited to take part in a debate at a popular science festival. My debate was entitled, Is War Inevitable? And was notable for the fact that we all agreed that no, war is not inevitable since it has not always existed. I love how scientific inquiry uncovers the wonders of the universe, so I enjoyed my time at the festival listening to talks and discussions about physics, biology, and cosmology. However, what disappointed me about the festival was that there was a sense of dogma pervading the air. Ironically, some of the attendees and participants of the festival reminded me of some religious people, in that they saw the world through the prism of a set of beliefs and displayed hostility to any alternative perspectives. There was a sense that we, the attendees of the festival, were the rational ones who were in possession of the truth, or at least working towards it, in contrast to others who were irrational and deluded. Does that sound familiar to a lot of things going on here? In particular, the speakers were disparaging to religion and, quote, New Age spirituality. From time to time, they would mention telepathy, homeopathy, or other types of pseudoscience as woo, as the speakers referred to it. The audience would respond by applauding their criticisms or murmuring with hostility. The speakers also seemed to feel that they were engaged in a common enterprise which would lead to a better future for the whole human race, a future in which human beings would be free from the ignorance of superstition and were able to understand the workings of the universe. One speaker, a well-known UK scientist, remarked that there were still some areas that science didn't fully understand, such as consciousness. But he said, we are making significant progress, and I have no doubt we'll get there eventually. Does some of that kind of sound familiar to things we're going on now? The notion that science can solve all ills. Science can solve every little ill and every little problem. It can give us answers to every question. Believe the science. That is scientism. It is very much an excessive belief in the capabilities of what science can do, placing too much. And a good scientist who's mindful of that excessive belief in that will keep themselves from thinking that they are all-knowing and wise and superior and what have you. And likewise, other people who say, screaming, believe the science and what have you, will recognize the limitations of what science can do. Science is a belief system. It may seem strange to talk about science in these terms. Science is supposed to be neutral and objective and free from beliefs. The role of scientists, well, I wouldn't say free from beliefs. Scientists are people, after all, they have their own belief systems. Science itself does not give you a worldview or a belief system. They come into this with the belief system that science can solve all ills, when it really can't. The role of scientists is to investigate the structure and laws of natural phenomena, to conduct research and advance knowledge. Find the truth, as I would say. Science is ideally an open-minded and open-ended process where theories are continually tested and updated based on evidence. It's true that there are many scientists who work diligently without pondering over the philosophical implications of their work, without consciously adopting any beliefs. It's also true that some scientists are genuinely open-minded and willing to revise their beliefs when confronted with evidence. But as the Science Festival illustrated, for many people, science has become associated with a particular worldview, which is often maintained and defended in a similar way to religion. This is the worldview of materialism, which holds that matter is the primary thing in the universe, and that anything that appears to be non-physical, such as the mind, our thoughts, consciousness, or even life itself, is physical in origin or can be explained in physical terms. Materialism holds that human beings are just biological machines, and that the only purpose of our lives is to survive and reproduce. It holds that anomalous phenomena, such as spiritual experiences, near-death experiences, or psi phenomena, are brain-generated illusions, or can be explained in terms of fraud or coincidence. Materialists are particularly opposed to psi phenomena, like telepathy or precognition, which they see as anathema to science, a throwback to a pre-Enlightenment world of magic. An alternative term for this belief system is Scientism, since it is a paradigm that has been derived from some of the findings of modern science. As psychologist Imants Barros has described it, quote, "Science is an open-ended exploration of reality based on logical thinking about empirical observations. Scientism is the adherence to a materialist version of reality that combines investigation to those sorts of things that are permitted by materialism." Okay. And that's a good definition of scientism. And the way I like to put it there is that it's very much an over-excessive belief in the capabilities of science. And it's a dangerous thing because if a scientist falls prey to the notion of scientism and doesn't recognize the limits of their craft, if you will, of being a scientist, that can lead to an awful lot of arrogance and hubris. And I do think when I'm thinking about it more and more is that the more you hear the notion, believe the science, follow the science, which, again, phrases that I hate myself, being a scientist. It's not a belief system. Thank you very much. You end up with this attitude that science can do no wrong, and that science, being the glorious thing that can solve all ills, should never be criticized. That we who are the scientists, for those who follow that scientism philosophy, we know better than everybody else. You should just listen to us. It's very much in line with how Plato thought of the world, that all the educated experts and philosophers should be the ones running everything because they have more knowledge and education than everybody else. That's Plato's kind of philosophy about how the world should be run. Aristotle had a very different view. And that's the challenge with it, is that it can be very tempting for someone who has a lot of knowledge in a particular field, and could justifiably be considered an expert in that field, to lord it over others. To say, I am better than you because I know X, or I'm great about this or that, or what have you. In scientism, I think, feeds really nicely into the issues of elitism. And if you go back to the video way back in the way yonder days, beginning of this channel, on elitism versus empathy, and you'll get at what I'm talking about there. And that brings me back to Dr. Anthony Fauci, top science advisor to the White House right now with respect to COVID-19. Again, I'm not commenting on COVID-19 itself or on the vaccine or what have you like that. Talk to the CDC, all that jazz. Talk to your doctor. Talk to your doctor about anything related to vaccines and medications for COVID-19. That's all I'm saying on that. I'm not commenting on that. I'm going to comment on Fauci's commentary that makes me really think that he's falling prey to the ideas of scientism as opposed to scientist that he is supposed to be. So he did an interview with Face the Nation, and I'm going to try and talk over some of this as he talks, because I do have... I'm going to move myself down here a little bit, because I do have a few things that I want to say as this goes along. And a lot of you probably seen the clip where he basically redid the whole "I am the science" thing that was a great meme from a few months ago, which again, all sorts of problems. But I always like to give a little bit more context to what was going leading up to that point, because I do want to comment on that. But there was more that he said that I want to comment on as it relates to philosophy of science, the normative principles of science, things that we've talked about many times on this channel. And I think this is a good chance to talk about it as relates to also scientism. So let's go. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do.
Tony Fauci is Tony Fauci.
Why do you feel so strongly about that, about staying on the job when you become, I mean, you were personally, not just rhetorically, threatened? Your security, your safety, your family.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
Okay, one thing I want to say here is that I have a lot of criticisms of Dr. Fauci. Don't threaten him. Don't harass him. Don't do that. That's not the right thing to do here and all that. That is absolutely not the right thing to do. I don't support it, so if you're doing that, please stop. What the heck?
I dealt with it by focusing on what my job is. From the time that I went into medicine to the right now where I am at my age, my job has been totally focused on doing what I can with the talents and the influence I had to make scientific advances to protect the health of the American public. So anybody who spends lies and threatens and all that theater that goes on with some of the investigations and the congressional committees and the Rand Pauls and all that other nonsense, that's noise, Margaret. That's noise.
Okay, so Dr. Fauci's talking about this with respect to how he dealt with being harassed, becoming the public face of COVID-19 response and all that, and being... It's never good. It's never good to engage in harassment of everybody. It's never good to be the subject of harassment. Having had that in my younger years, I know that one well. Having had that kind of stuff happen to me in my younger years, yes, I do know that one well, and it is definitely unwelcome. What I would say here is he is talking about, I got through that by focusing on what my job is. My job is making scientific advancements with the talents and abilities and things that I have on hand to the benefit of the American people. Here's the thing that comes back to this important. Remember, one of the scientific norms, one of the normative principles of science is disinterestedness, which is to say your pursuit, your research-wise pursuit should be based upon the truth. Fauci is different here because he is the head of the National Institutes for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which is part of the National Institutes of Health. And that means he has a vested interest in what kind of science gets funded, right? So he's a little bit different because he himself is not doing scientific research. So he can have a little bit of a vested interest in what kind of research is being done and what kind of research gets funded. He can have that vested interest in there. And as it's been in the news, he has, the NIAID, along with the NIH, they put out requests for proposals just like any other agency in the federal government does. And so they want specific answers to specific questions. That's what they're going to put out requests for proposals about, is I want to pay for research that looks at these particular questions over here. Because I think it's going to be helpful for the American public, or this is a problem that I perceive that we have. Things like that can happen, and that's different from the scientific researcher who's actively doing the research as opposed to the guy who's there funding the research, or has a vested interest in what gets funded. And I mean, at the same time, he is supposed to be, if he is the guy paying for the research, or representing the agency that is paying for the research, let's say, it is his responsibility to be a good caretaker for taxpayer dollars that is being used to fund said research anywhere in the world, regardless of what researchers get funded. I am not going to comment on the gain of function stuff. That's not the point here. But he is supposed to be carefully overseeing that. But he also has invested interest because although there's different boards, and just like when I and others go to get journal articles published, there's peer review, and you get multiple outside reviewers who are anonymous, and they review the article I'm about to write and whether or not it's good for the journal, and the editor makes a decision. What it is often is the same kind of thing with reviews of grant proposals, where you have a whole panel of people that review every single proposal and therefore go in and then say, okay, this proposal has this problem, this problem, this problem. We think this is great. It gives all the critiques and feedback and what have you, and they recommend XYZ proposals for funding. But somebody else ultimately makes the decision on which ones get funded. And that's probably where I wouldn't say Fauci himself, because I don't know how NIAID is structured. But he would know what was ultimately getting funded, at least. So he doesn't necessarily have the disinterestedness, and that's why I say that, because he's not the one doing the research. He is essentially representing an agency that funds the research. At this point, I very much doubt he has been involved in clinical studies himself in the last few years. I could be wrong. Fact check me on that. I could be wrong. But anyway, that's just a comment I want to make, is understand the distinction between a scientist who is now head of an agency that funds research versus a scientist that goes and competes for the grants. Then has to run through that whole rigmarole, and they are the ones over here who have to be disinterested. Where Fauci would need to be disinterested is in the results of whatever he funds. He doesn't get to say whether or not he dislikes it if it doesn't go into the record. It has to, per a bunch of transparency laws that exist, not to mention just the communality principle of science. If it's something that, the answer to the question wasn't something that he liked, it doesn't matter that he doesn't like it. That's what the truth was. And so there's a lot of that there. But also, as I would say, as the director of such a big agency and now top COVID advisor, it's also his responsibility to be knowledgeable on all the COVID-19 research that there is. And I would hope that he is. I don't know, to be honest, from some of the things said. And that's probably why he gets some challenges. Let's continue. There we go. I can't see the timer because I couldn't know when the timestamp I wanted to stop at.
I know what my job is.
Senator Cruz told the Attorney General you should be prosecuted.
Yeah. I'd have to laugh at that. I should be prosecuted. What happened on January 6th, Senator?
Do you think that this is about making you a scapegoat to deflect
Of
from
course.
President Trump?
Of course. You have to be asleep not to figure that one out.
Really? See, here's the thing with this. One of the other normative principles of science, as we've talked about this before, is organized skepticism, where every single claim is heavily scrutinized. And one of the things that matters in this is that every single claim is heavily scrutinized because we want to make sure they are valid and correct. Now, I don't blame Fauci for being aggravated with political theater. Lord only knows I've been watching it and what has been done in my own field in climate science. It happens to no end on left and right. And I wouldn't doubt it happens to no end on left and right with related to public health, too. It's more so, what aggravates me in all of this is that he, for whatever reason, thinks criticisms and critiques of him are just to deflect, are just for this. There is no self-reflection in here of what did I do wrong? What do they have a point? Do they this? Do they that? And I understand he is, technically the White House chief advisor on COVID-19, and so certain things in maintaining public face and what have you. But at the same time, he's all-knowing. Do you already get that vibe that he is all knowing in this situation, that he knows the science? He is, well, I'm not gonna give it away for him, but he's the all knowing one in all this. He has all the right answers. In here is where he's coming at. He doesn't seem to have a critique of self in this. And that's why I'm bringing it up again with scientism. Is it science that he represents, or is it scientism?
Well, there are a lot of Republican senators taking aim at this. I mean,
That's okay. I'm just going to do my job. And I'm going to be saving lives, and they're going to be lying.
it seems another layer of danger to play politics.
So again, I just want to emphasize it one more time. And part of the reason I'm talking a bit is I know this is Face of the Nation. So I'm just giving some commentary over top. The thing here is that she's again, I'm going to be doing my job and they're going to be lying. Part of your job, Dr. Fauci, is criticism. If you are a scientist, part of your job is lots of scrutiny and criticism and what have you, and even more so because you are in a position where you are overseeing taxpayer dollars with funding. You are going to be criticized, and you should not be necessarily, well, no, I mean, obviously you're going to have opinions about the people who are critiquing you and what have you. We can't get necessarily getting away from passing judgments on that. But to not have any self-reflection, to just immediately assume they're lying, it says a lot that you're not necessarily, that there's not necessarily an interest in taking criticism. Thinking again of the thing of scientism, how it is very much no critiques, no debates, no dissenting voices. I'm better. We are better because we follow the science. We are better because we are following the science and supposedly following the truth. Remember, believe the science. Science doesn't have a belief system. Science doesn't give you that. Science doesn't give you a moral compass. Science does not give you a belief system, period, end of sentence there. It is a process by which we adjudicate claims, find the truth. Nothing else, with evidence and data. And believe it or not, I think he gets to that at some point.
Around matters of life and death.
Exactly. And to me, that's unbelievably bad, because all I want to do is save people's lives. That's what I have done for the last 50 years, 37 of which was leading the Institute. And when I see people who scatter around misinformation and lies that can actually endanger the lives of people, but also it is very easy to pick out an individual.
Okay. He's about to get into the clip that's been circulating, so I want to stop there for a minute. Here's my question for Mr. Fauci, Dr. Fauci. Yes, I would agree with you. Blatant lies, probably a bad thing. Shouldn't be circulated everywhere. At the same time, here's my other question for you. How do you know what you are saying is precisely the truth? If you are not willing to subject yourself to the critique, to subject your knowledge base to the critiques, to look at every possible study, all the studies that you can with respect to COVID-19, and the same should be true of any scientist who's dealing with critiques. Look through the studies that, don't share your particular opinion on how something works and critique them. How do we know what you're saying is just as true? And I mean, I would presume it is, in the sense that, you should have access to the data, to the analysis, and what have you. But as you all may recall from the video on the public trust in scientists with the panel group, a lot of them had a problem with Fauci because of his attitude toward people like this, where he's just like, I know better than everyone else. Why should we trust you if that's the attitude that you come off with? Kind of thing. That's what concerns me a lot with Fauci. And that's, again, where I think, is it scientism that comes across with Fauci more than science at this point? And I think that, and to be honest, I think that's a very fair critique to make, to ask that question of scientists. And I really would like to see it done more. And I have no problem with general public critiquing anything that I do. Go to town. But it's But it's also the thing of, want to get in there and critique people. And I think it's a good idea to do that. And at the same time, it is also a fair thing, I think, for anyone to ask, is someone who has been in the limelight, particularly as much as Fauci has been, are they interested in science or are they more after scientism at this point? And there's a big difference there in all this.
Make them a target because that's what people can focus on. But you're talking about systems. You're talking about the CDC. You're talking about the FDA. You're talking about science in general. So if they want to, I mean, anybody who's looking at this carefully realizes that there's a distinct anti-science flavor to this. So if they get up and criticize science, nobody's going to know what they're talking about. But if they get up and really aim their bullets at Tony Fauci, well, people can recognize there's a person there, there's a face, there's a voice you can recognize, you see him on television, so it's easy to criticize. But they're really criticizing science, because I represent science. That's dangerous. To me, that's more dangerous than the slings and the arrows that get thrown at me. I'm not going to be around here forever, but science is going to be here forever. And if you damage science, you are doing something very detrimental to society long after I leave. And that's what I worry about.
And
I don't quite know how I want to respond to that last part. So you saw what was in there, that the clip is that has been circulating. That was the I am the science moment. I represent the science. And he's talking about damaging science. If you keep on doing this, you're damaging science. Science can last forever unless you damage it. I'm not worried about me. You're damaging the science. That is that is really a strong belief system, that you think science is eternal, that science is going to be around forever. But that's not in line with what most scientists actually think. Well, I mean, science can be around forever in the sense of so long as you're practicing norms and things like that and what have you, and it can certainly evolve and change. I'm not going to deny that. But to have that belief system that science is forever, problem is, it's not, because it's not a thing. It's not a physical thing. It is a process by which we find the truth, as I've said many times over. What he's more talking about is the idea that these attacks damage the credibility of professionals who are engaging in the scientific process. And I think because he mentions many times CDC, FDA, things like that, the credibility of government scientists is what he's talking about here also. Is what I think he's really getting at. But it comes off with such a flair that I'm like, huh? What? Why are you? What? Huh? I'm very confused. I'm thinking about it in my head there for a second anyway. I'm just like, no, Fauci. Science is not some eternal thing, like God or Allah. Whichever faith you may practice, whichever set of spiritual beliefs you may have, science is not that. The government is not that either. The government is not the alpha and the omega, if you will. Neither is science. It's not eternal, and it's a process by which we find the truth. And the credibility of scientists very much depends upon how much they are willing to communicate the truth and stick to what the truth is, even if it goes against their own vested interests. It depends upon scientists being willing to accept critiques and challenges and come back and, argue those kinds of things. And I will say, Senator Rand Paul himself is also a doctor and very knowledgeable in these things. And so I think that's a bit of doctor on doctor arguments there that they keep having in front of congressional committee. But, yeah, Anyway, like I said, seems a tad scientism-ish and less scientist. Less like a scientist, if you see what I'm getting at here. So think about things with scientism. That's why I wanted to open this with that definition of scientism, is you're thinking about, do you hold science on a pedestal where it is the best thing and always the best thing? Because for me, I think science is great, amazing, does awesome things. I consider the fact that you're able to get 3 vaccines in a short period of time a remarkable achievement. Questions on efficacy and things like that. Of course, go talk to CDC and all those kinds of things, and to your doctor and what have you. I'm not arguing that. That's not the point. But with what science can do and what's achieved, and achievements in treatments, in medicine, in in resilience and preparedness and hydrology and all sorts of things like that, science is amazing. But it is not infallible. It is not the be-all and end-all. It's designed to get at things that are, when we scrutinize claims and they withstand scrutiny, they are provisionally true until we end up with more evidence that may suggest to the otherwise. And we have to be open to that evidence and critique. That is why science is not something that is eternal. It is not a belief system. You don't believe the science. You don't make an irrational claim just because some scientist says so, necessarily. That doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to a scientist and things like that, but it also doesn't mean you make all your decisions entirely on what just a scientist tells you. In these kinds of things. So, hey, Dr. Fauci, you're not being a scientist. I gotta say, if you're saying you're the scientist, you are the science, which by the way, you're not, and science can't be criticized, I'm sorry, you're not a scientist. That violates the principle of organized skepticism straight away. You're not a scientist, Dr. Fauci, if you're saying that. Let us continue. I think I only got about a minute and a half left of what I wanted to say here.
In real world terms, what does that mean? Does that mean you fear vaccination rates go down? Does that mean the next a national emergency, people just don't listen to the doctors? What do you mean?
What I'm concerned about is that if you put science aside and if you discredit science, you start to discredit the truth of what it takes to get people their health preserved, prevent disease, treat disease. When you do that, you are going to really disrupt society in very many respects, and that's what I worry about. I mean, anybody who looks at what's going on in the United States, to say there's not a lot of lies become normalized now, and the social media amplifies the normalization of lies. So scientists try to say, this is the truth and it's based on data. That's what we live by. Data, evidence, truth. And then you all of a sudden have permeating in society, it is okay to say anything you want that is patently, obviously wrong. And if you say it long enough and often enough, and you get social media involved, then not everybody, X% of the population starts believing it. See, that's what I worry about more than people throwing slings and arrows at me, because my whole life has been as a scientist, and I identify with the field of health and science. And if you're attacking me, you're really attacking science. I mean, everybody knows that.
No, we actually don't all know that. We don't all know that because that's not what we're doing. Critiquing you for what you're doing does not mean anyone's critiquing or attacking science. And again, saying that you are the science shows me that you are not a scientist. That is more scientism than science as far as I'm concerned. And I would say also again, as I said it before, you are, this is fascinating because he also said on the one hand, just like people can spout off anything that they want to and, can be completely untrue. Yeah, that's called having an opinion. You wouldn't want your opinions to be informed by evidence, but yeah, you can have an opinion. You have a First Amendment right in the United States of America, at least for now. Now, you have a First Amendment right in the United States to say whatever the heck you want, even if it is patently untrue. And that is the thing. But you don't... He doesn't, it screams of, if you criticize me, you're you're attacking science. No. You notice how he referred to it. He didn't refer to scientists. He didn't refer to professionals in that whole segment just now. He referred to the science. If you discredit science, if you discredit those kinds of things, the truth of what you're attacking the truth of what it takes to get people public health safety, or something along that line is what he said. I may go back and rewatch that in a second. But it's remarkable because he never mentioned the individuals. There's a lot of scientists that do a lot of work in a lot of different fields. It's not the credibility of science that is the issue, because science is a process by which we get to the truth. But one can always question, one can always challenge whether or not they think a scientist is being genuine in their pursuit of the truth, whether or not they think a science study is unbiased. And that is why we have the principle of organized skepticism as a normative principle of scientific practice, in that you always critique and challenge everything to the nth degree to make sure that it is an unbiased study, that it is not, that the scientist in question performing the study is not doing something to point the study and to give an answer, a desired answer, but is rather looking for the answer, or the truth, if you will. And that's, unfortunately, it's unfortunately terrible to see that he is trying to conflate he's trying to conflate attacks upon him when he has not been necessarily the best spokesperson for COVID-19. Critiques of him, the advice that he has given, critiquing all of it, which our elected representatives most definitely have the right to do and should do. They should critique and challenge him in his primary role and responsibility to the Americans and to the taxpayers who pay his salary. Everybody does have a right to critique him. And that doesn't mean we're critiquing science, Mr. Fauci. And so, yeah, no, I hate to break it to you, you're not the science. Too bad, Dr. Fauci, you are not the science. I think that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, walking through a little bit of that commentary, because I saw that over the weekend and I wanted to give it a little bit more jazz over that and the difference between science and scientism. Let me know what you think. Do you think Fauci's got a little bit more science or more scientism going on here as he's been talking lately? I'm somewhere in the middle, because I want to give him credit. He has been there for a very long time. He's been a very good scientist and working doctor and what have you. I'm sure he probably hasn't seen a patient in a while, but he has probably been a very good doctor during the course of his career. So I'm going to credit him that, not knowing everything for sure. But at least in what I'm seeing now, it doesn't seem like science as much as scientism. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this video, hit the like button on the way out the door. Share the video, comment on the video, and tell me your thoughts, all that good jazz. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this kind of content. And, of course, make sure to check us out over on Locals, where we're going to start and do more things over on Locals, exclusive to supporters. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm Adrian. Until next time, stay curious, my friends.